But for people, particularly young people who are really interested and keen and motivated, you'd be hard pressed to get a leader of an organization who refuses that opportunity or isn't interested in that. Number one, and so in my last three jobs, I've actually physically taken the door off the office.
How can a set of skills lead you down the path to success? That's what we're setting out to answer on the EdUp Canada podcast. I'm your host, Michael Sangster. Join me as we unpack how leaders around the world have taken training and skills and turned that into a lasting career. Now let's learn together. I couldn't be more excited to have David Goldstein here. David's going to tell you a little bit about his own career, his own past, some of the things that he's gone through. David and I have known each other for 30 years, David?
Something like that.
Something like
That we'd admit to.
That we will admit to. We've had some ups and downs in our careers, a lot of ups. We've both been very, very fortunate. But I've been excited to hear what he's doing. David's taken some paths in his career and is now living in Calgary, Alberta, with two jobs. He was just telling me about two jobs he's got, and we're going to hear a little bit about him and what he's doing. And I'm looking forward to it. So, David, welcome. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing today.
Thanks, Mike. Good to see you again. I'd like to start off this discussion by telling folks that my father's a psychologist with a master's degree in career counseling and always referred to me as the guidance counselor's nightmare. There are a lot of different paths to get to a lot of places in life. Just to add more context, my poor late grandmother never knew how I was going to make a living with a political science degree. But we figured it out. And as Mike alluded to, I'm currently the CEO of Travel Alberta, which is a Crown agency here in Alberta supporting the visitor economy with promotion and access to capital. I've also recently been asked to take on the additional duty as Deputy Minister of the new Department of Tourism and Sport, largely reflecting the government's huge interest in these sectors, particularly in tourism. And one of the reasons that attracted me to come to Alberta 3 years ago, in the middle of COVID, great time to start a tourism job, but in the middle of COVID to be part of something very exciting, which was a cutting-edge plan to rebuild the visitor economy despite COVID or after COVID, which has led us to a place where next to BC, we're leading the recovery across from all of the jurisdictions across the country. So there's a lot of exciting stuff going on. It took, to Mike, to your point, it were quite a few twists and turns along the way. First of all, I've been the beneficiary of some incredible mentors. Some of them might have been actually Mike and I may have shared over the years, but who had given me really great advice. As Mike knows, I started off in the broadcast telecom business, and I had a good mentor I think a joint mentor of ours, Janet Yale, once tell me that when you're young and ambitious, you're climbing up the ladder, you're climbing fast up the ladder. Sometimes the higher you climb up the ladder, the harder it is to jump to another ladder. And that was sort of a seminal point that I think Mike was referring to. About 15 years ago, I left the broadcast media business and made that shift to the tourism business, which in hindsight looks really fortuitous because of what's going on in the media business right now. But it was a really big challenge, a little bit scary at the time, but probably one of the better decisions my wife made for me over the years.
She's making a lot of very good decisions for you. We all know that. It's funny you mentioned Janet. I think I'd also mention Mike Robinson as one of those people we leaned into. Janet was one of the most fair, decent bosses I ever had. Pushed us hard, but was very fair. For those of you who don't know, David and I have often been referred to as a bit of the Statler and Waldorf. If you know the two old gentlemen from the Muppets, a bit grumpy, but also both very, very optimistic people, ready to take on challenges. So part of the reason that we're doing this podcast is to give people a chance to think about new directions, to think about new ideas, and that there's different paths. So I'm going to challenge you off the top here, David. what skill or skills would you suggest a grade 10 student is looking for to be successful today in any sector? And then maybe in your own sector, now that you're in the you've embraced this tourism world, and you gotta love being in Alberta when you're if you're gonna be a tourist. There are some beautiful places in this country, but Alberta's one of them for sure. So what would you say a skill or a skill set that an individual in grade 10 should be looking to develop?
So, two things I normally tell folks. Number one, find good mentors. You and I have both been the beneficiaries of great mentors, and mentors just don't fall into your lap normally. You should be actively looking at people to help you learn and grow and expand your views on things. And I've been a great beneficiary of those. But and this sounds very simple, but it applies to our industry and just about every other sector, is raising your EQ, raising your own personal connectivity skills. I remember very early on, coming out of high school, going to university, someone said to me, the best people have either waited tables or worked retail or both, because you get to see both the best and the worst of humanity all at the same time. And learning those skills of those interrelational skills. I have daughters that are starting their careers right now. And during the pandemic, we would watch The Office together, and they would laugh at different things than my wife and I would, because they hadn't worked in an office before. And some of those relational skills, no matter what career you choose or what path, you will tend to be the person that rise up because you can read the signs. And I believe that that's not just for extroverts. I think introverts can benefit from that as well. So some sort of direct personal experience on how to best relate to other people, understand what people's needs are, put yourself in somebody else's shoes. I think those are sort of seminal, and those are the kind of things that traditional education may not teach, and that you've got to learn along the way. And the second piece, and I know this sounds, this is not meant to be an elitist piece. I think people who are well-read and understand the world around them tend to benefit from opportunities as well, and can find their way up the ladder. You don't have to, you and I have been known as sort of political junkies, news junkies. I think just a general understanding of the world around you, because people who are making hiring and promoting decisions want people who kind of understand some of the shorthand. I think that's been a bit of a barrier. I'm in a sector, and both directly in my organization and in a sector that employs a lot of millennials and Zeds. And sometimes you just want them to get it, right? Like sometimes they refer to them as dad jokes and all that stuff, but that's okay. But someone with a better understanding of the world around them and some of the cultural cues, I think if you're putting yourself in the shoes of the people who are hiring and promoting, I think that's an important piece that we don't talk a lot about.
I'm with you. And on the mentoring front, I think it takes it on any leader to spend that time to find those opportunities for them to hear that. Because when you mentor, when you lead that way, you also get as much from them as they get from you. So I think that's in a different way of saying what you're saying. You'll draw out of them, and I look for that well-read, aware of what's going on in the world. In my day, it was 10 o'clock the National. I wouldn't miss it. Now it's 8 o'clock Anderson Cooper for me. Even if I watch it delayed at midnight, or I watch it on that half hour, an hour of what's happening in the world, and I find he's my guy now. But to me, it was Peter Mansbridge when we were growing up, that I just get a perspective on what's happening in the world.
So I'd list that. I don't mean to drone on here, Mike, but I think the other thing is something I put into practice as a leader, but something I used to push through. You hear a lot of leaders say, well, I have an open door policy, and not too many people actually push their way through the door, right? Or actually avail themselves of it. And I was, and again, because you knew me when I was younger, I was a bit pushy and not afraid. And I availed myself of open. I availed myself of the open door policy, which, you got to be careful, because unless you're prepared to go through that door and be ready for the discussion, you can get, there's nothing worse than than wasting that opportunity. But for people, particularly young people who are really interested and keen and motivated, you'd be hard pressed to get a leader of an organization who refuses that opportunity or isn't interested in that. Number one, so in my last 3 jobs, I've actually physically taken the door off the office. So you can't see this because the camera's not on, but I don't have a door to this office, and it's more set up like a lounge. And I invite people to come in and sit on the couch and talk about stuff. And to your earlier point, Mike, I learn as much from those sessions as I put out. So,
I'm with you 100%.
If the leader of your organization hasn't explicitly said that they have an open door policy, send them an email and ask them if you can avail yourself of their open door policy.
So we talk about education on this podcast a lot, but it's a lot more as we progress through interviews. It's about leadership. It's about those kind of lessons in life. I'll take anybody to war with me who opens my door and wants to have a conversation, who wants to get engaged and wants to push forward. So I'm always challenging that way. And then you got to do the reverse too, though, is you got to listen to them. So the best version of it I've heard was when I was at TELUS, we engaged and worked with a thing called fair process. You listen, and sometimes the leader has to take a decision, but if people feel they've been a part of the decision and they've had a chance to engage and make their point made, even if they disagree, they'll engage and support you and run through the finish line with you. And I found that when I was in TELUS, and that's the kind of culture I try and create. And then the reverse of it is you've got to give them a chance. You got to let them run with stuff too. You got to let them make mistakes, and you go, okay, let's regroup, let's fix it, and go forward. So I agree with you that open door, whether there's a door or not, and virtual leading makes that even more difficult. Leading people who you never see, so hard to build that trust.
Which leads us to another topic. I know you're supposed to be asking the questions, but the whole issue of coming back to work and virtual, which I'm going to state up front, it's going to get me in trouble. I think that's a white collar luxury. Like there's a lot of folks in my industry who don't have the luxury. Checking into a hotel virtually. And that created a lot of tension in our sector during and coming out of COVID, right? Because there were the vast majority of those jobs, or many of those jobs, were tied to actually connecting with people and being in place, right? But the other side of that, and I can argue both the upsides and the downsides to it, but the other side, which is now starting to emerge, is this notion of proximity bias, and is it true that people who show up are getting promoted at a higher rate, getting considered for special tasks and projects? Like, what does that mean? And like my eldest daughter, who's recently graduated in the workforce right now, I feel I'm feeding into that a little bit because I counsel her to go to work. Like, yes, you can work from home, but let the water cooler be your friend. And I know this is a controversial thing and people are talking through this right now, but I really feel for young people coming into the workplace, if they, there's a lot of debate about what it does for cultures of organizations, all that stuff. But I think in seeking out mentors and wanting to be in what we call the deal flow, showing up is a bigger part of this, and I think we're prepared to acknowledge right now.
Well, it's interesting because we look at the same perspective when it comes to education in the regulated career college sector, training online, and there are an incredible amount of benefits to those. Some programs have got to be face to face. You can imagine in some of the skilled trades, you've got to put your hands on a welding machine. Yeah. You've got to put your hands on a patient. Or a substitute for a patient in training someone to be a continuing care aide or a personal support worker. But other programs are best taught. And a lot of our students in our colleges are older, more mature, might be single parents, have a couple of jobs, are training at night and weekends. So online learning works great. And our colleges are constantly working on balancing out mental health issues and other issues to get people together to make sure those conversations are happening. And that, I think you put it best, that water cooler factor. Nothing beats that conversation at the water cooler. Nothing beats that glass of beer or a cup of coffee at the end of the day where you sit around the table, and I think the best leaders, there isn't even an agenda. You don't even talk about work.
Yeah, one of my mentors, great mentors, the late Jay Switzer, who was the CEO of Chum Limited, his line was, "The water cooler is the best piece of office equipment I own."
Yeah.
And anyway, I think getting back to, I know you want to talk about the educational side of this. I think, there's core curriculum, there's choosing a program, but listen, I was joking at the beginning about a political science degree, how did I get here? I have another daughter who's in kinesiology, who's not sure where she's going to go with that, doesn't want to be a physiotherapist. I try and counsel my team members, my I dare say, sort of the folks, especially the younger folks on my team, that it's only a ladder exercise. Again, I keep going back to that ladder analogy. These are the building blocks, or the tools that you put together to climb the ladder. And don't worry too much about the program that you're in right now. Yes, certain programs will get you accreditation and ready for a certain type of job. But but think about that within a 20, 30, 40-year career, right? Nobody, you and I graduated from very esteemed universities several decades ago. Nobody asked us where we went to school. Nobody asked us what our grades were. Nobody wants to know if I finished my degree in 4 or 5 years. Like that doesn't matter. But I think for young people right now, they get very consumed with that, because there is a culture of be trained and get out into the workforce. And I'm not in the camp of less learning, more earning. Like I think people should equip themselves and put tools in the toolbox. But that's a constant life skill. Like moving from broadcast government relations guy to provincial deputy minister took a lot of steps along the way, and a lot of unforeseen steps.
And we're all shocked as you are that you got there. So on that note, though, let's circle back. You went back to it. Let's go back to your sector you're in now. So what are you, 20 years in tourism now?
But almost 18.
Okay. You mentioned it earlier, so let me touch on 2 topics and let you rant.
Yeah.
The skills, kind of the level of skills that you see now, or that you that have changed over time, that are needed to be in that sector. But I think also, let's go back to, what are the opportunities in that sector? Because part of our audience is people who want to retrain. As I mentioned earlier, our average student for us is in their 30s, single mom, working 2 jobs, 1 job, has children, married, looking for a new path, looking for a new challenge, not quite sure what it is. And as you know, I own a restaurant. I know the opportunities, and I put restaurant in tourism because they all end up associated in that service sector. And to your point earlier, I do believe with you as well, work in service. It teaches you a lot about people. It teaches you on how to deal with people, and it teaches you how to deal with conflict, difficult situations, building teams. There's a ton of skills that come out of that kind of role. But what are the opportunities in the sector that you're working in? And then make a pitch for Alberta. Why should people be in Alberta in the tourism sector? That's part of your job, right?
Right. So first things first, and we admit as an industry, we've done a pretty poor sales job. And COVID didn't help. This industry, not just in Canada, but globally, kind of benefited from the fact that you get a bunch of young, keen people who come to the sector because of the lifestyle, because they're interested in travel, they're interested in the benefits of travel. And then some of them go on to much bigger and different roles within the sector, but we haven't really talked about those. And we need to do a better job of that. Like, there's, I don't know if she'd want me to mention her, but anyway, another mentor of mine, Heather McCory, just retired as the CEO of Accor Fairmont Hotels across the Americas. At 19 years old, she started in the laundry room at the Banff Springs Hotel. And I think we need to do a better job explaining there are finance and IT jobs. Like people, what happens in a lot of sectors, Mike, is that the public perceives a sector based on who they know and who they have contact with. So if your contact in the sector is someone waiting tables, somebody checking you in at the front desk, someone who makes your bed, that's what you think the sector is comprised of, right? As opposed to, I have a whole bunch of gifted people downstairs that are in the marketing business, and there's a plethora of marketing opportunities in this sector, high-end, high-tech, smart marketing positions. Engineering, the people who design and build facilities. There's hotels and convention centers. There's an engineering aspect to this. There's definitely a huge IT business here. Everything from the way the loyalty programs and customer and booking and there's a ton of IT and coding pieces in the space. So I think our sector has to do a little bit better of talking about what you can grow into, as opposed to the old McDonald's line, America's best first job. I think we suffer a little bit from that it's a great first job, and it's great to go to Banff to work for the summer because it's great. But there are careers that get made and leaders, and I would go one further. I know so many leaders in other industries who all started in the service sector, who all started in the tourism sector, right? Like if you get a room of CEOs and ask them to put up their hands as to who started off in the hotel, restaurant, service sector, you'll see a majority of folks put their hands up, right? So I think that's a piece we have to work on. And then the second piece about Alberta, well, it's a beautiful part of the country. I'm supposed to say, but I mean it. We have an incredible long-term tourism strategy. It's becoming an important part of our economic diversity strategy. So it's, despite what most people think, Albertans also care about what happens above the ground, not just what happens below the ground, and providing those opportunities in a sustainable way. Indigenous tourism is a huge central focus of our plan, and we're just scratching the surface on both the opportunity and the demand. But there's also a cost advantage. Organizations like WestJet are working closely with the post-secondary education institutions here to train pilots and mechanics, and those are great high-paying jobs, which are even more high-paying when the cost of your house is half of what it is in Toronto or Ottawa or Vancouver. There's a lifestyle. There's a lifestyle piece. And again, I'm about to sound like an infomercial, but it's kind of what I do. My wife and I are an hour from Banff. We will drive up to Lake Louise to go skiing for the morning and come back because we can. So there's a great lifestyle benefit here. But as a visitor and as somewhere to work, if somebody's looking for an entry into the business, there's probably no better place in Canada because we have some of those great icons and some of those great opportunities, whether it's organizations like Fairmont or Pursuit, or even some of the sporting organizations. We are a former Olympic destination, so if you're interested in outdoor management, sports management, there's huge opportunities in this province. Just based on where we are and what the composition of opportunities are here.
So bring it back here for one more kind of run at something here, just to see your gut reaction. You've been successful. You've had ups and downs. We all do. What's the biggest sacrifice in your career? That moment that you gave something up to be successful. Do you have one in mind? Or maybe it's a regret now, but it wasn't then, or you knew at the time. You know what I mean? It's those difficult decisions when you're either training to do something different, taking on something different, or just a career decision.
One was sort of terrifying, but ended up being good because I had to move. I talked about leaping from ladder to ladder. When I was appointed as the CEO of Destination Canada, which used to be the Canadian Tourism Commission, it was headquartered in Vancouver, and moved my family out there to chase that opportunity, including two daughters that were in high school at the time, and that was hard. Sometimes these upward launches it can't just be about you. It has to be about your family or other circumstances. And eventually my daughters actually really loved living there and they made a great adjustment, but that was hard. Moving teenagers halfway across the country is hard. Moving and as you know, my wife was always a fairly high-placed professional. It took a bit of a toll on her career. It was hard for her to do her job from Vancouver. So that was a big adjustment. I think it was a net positive for all of us at the end, but it was scary. and then, and I hope maybe this is over personalizing your question. Maybe this is more than you wanted, but I had moved back to Ottawa, and then this opportunity came up and moved back west, but this time to Calgary, and I have aging parents back in Ottawa, and that's hard, right?
It's hard.
That's a hard time of life. But and I can also make all kinds of flippant remarks about work-life balance, which I'm not sure at this level. I'm a big proponent of it, but I'm kind of like the shoemaker's kid that has no shoes. I literally, just before this call, my CFO came in to remind me that I have over 30 days of unused vacation time. Like that if that that's there's a sacrifice there.
I call it work-life balance.
Yeah.
We love the work.
But, well, and hopefully you know this personally, but I hope the listeners have a sense of it. If you're really passionate about what you're doing, that creates its own reward.
Yep, it's easy. So I'm going to go back. One last question for you. In your own career, you go back 30 years. What's the skill you wish you had then that you've got now, that someone had taught you, that education brought you?
Math. So I'll tell you,
financial literacy or math?
Well, both. Actually, no. It's a funny, and I freely admit this. Had I grown up these days, I would have been diagnosed with a severe learning disability, and I'm basically innumerate. Okay, so I have trouble with numbers. Oddly, when I was in high school, I was flunking math, but I got A's in accounting, which sounds counterintuitive. But then I asked my dad, who was a career specialist. He's like, because there's a different side of the brain, right? You understand the methodology of accounting. You just don't understand calculus and functions, right? It's a different kind. You could argue they're all numbers, but it's a different sort of language. The funny thing, Mike, is I did so horribly in high school in math that it hurt my opportunities to go further. What I really love is statistics, and I use statistics every day. And I had to, I've been blessed with a lot of support folks on my team over the years who are great at crunching numbers, but the communication skills I picked up along the way of how to use statistics to make an argument has been very helpful to me. But I wish I'd had teachers who had figured out how to help me through that, because I never could foresee how much I use statistics on a day-to-day basis just to make the arguments that need to be made. And I wish I had a better foundation in that as a young person, as a kid.
That's a good answer. I'm proud of the fact that our organization's leading with a group called Enriched Academy on. I struggled in math. I was horrible in math in high school. I was in what we called at St. Paul's High School in Winnipeg football math. The offensive line was with me, the defensive line was with me, and we got our way through it. I was horrible at math, but financial literacy, we're working with this Enriched Academy to make sure our students, as many as possible, leave the program with literacy in how to manage their own money. And God, I wish I had that when I was younger. The mistakes we all make in managing our own money and the way we do things. We don't teach it, and we need to teach it. And I love working with some of these groups that are training employers now, so that they teach the employees on financial literacy, so that they can turn that 80 grand into more and make it work.
I'll take that one step further. It's one of the things we do within our organization. I want, no matter where you work in the organization, I need you to have a base understanding of how the financial structure works. How does the business plan work? So we have quarterly town hall meetings where we walk through the business plan, we walk through the KPIs for the organization, we walk through people even at the lower levels in the organization or are involved in the budget process. We need them to understand how this works, because financial literacy, personal financial literacy, is an important thing that I don't think we're teaching as kids. But then, as people grow into executive roles, not having an understanding of finance is one of the biggest things that holds them back.
Yep.
And several times in my career, I've sent executives off to these, finance for the non-finance professional. that and project management are probably the two life skills that I have invested the most. I was going to say spent, but I would say invested the most from a professional development basis with people in my organizations over the last 3 or 4 jobs. Biggest outcomes.
So let me go back to the first question then. I think you just answered it in a different way. You started with answering mentoring is probably the best thing that you could find somebody as a young student. Get a good mentor and ride with them. But maybe 1A is know the numbers and know how to get things done. Know how to build a plan and know what the numbers mean as you go down the path.
Yeah, and I think, again, it depends who your audience is. Are we advising young people coming up? Are we advising leaders? I think on both sides. For young people going up, we talked about awareness and human skills and all that stuff, but understanding the organization and it's a very simple human function of understanding, what it's like in the other person's shoes. So your manager, your leader, often is considering those financial issues. If you have a better understanding of that, you have a better kinship or a better possibility to build that relationship with folks who are hiring, folks who are promoting. And then the Crawley side is leaders. Those are the areas that people don't necessarily think about when they think about human. How many times have we sat in annual reviews and there's a box that you have to fill out on professional development? Those aren't necessarily the ones that people think about, right? And I think it's our job as leaders, mentors, to sort of help people understand that, what are the tools that you're going to put in your toolbox. And I'm going to quote Jay on another, my mentor, Jay Switzer, on another thing. He believed that jobs aren't a destination, they're an escalator, right? You're not supposed to, the job isn't the destination, and your job, but the thing is to pick up tools and to fill your toolbox as you go up the escalator to the next thing. And leaders have to be okay with the fact that they can help people put tools in their toolbox, even if this isn't the ultimate destination for that person. That retention and turnover isn't necessarily, in the right circumstances, it's not a bad thing. It's a great renewal. If it's managed properly, it's an important part of renewal of an organization. And too often HR people and leaders are scared of turnover as opposed to seeing it as an opportunity. Let somebody else go I love helping people progress in their career, whether they're going to do it here or I help them do it somewhere else.
I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm just going to say, David, great to reconnect again. I know we had breakfast recently when you were in Ottawa, and I appreciate you being, honest about family and parents and all kinds of other things that impact the path. But I think there's a couple of nuggets in there. When I asked David to join me on the podcast, he said, "What do I know about education?" And I said, "Probably very little because you're not that bright." And he's laughing. David and I have known each other a long time, but he said, "What am I going to bring to education?" I said, "It's about leadership. It's about mentoring. It's about all kinds of different conversations." And I encourage you to take a look at what they're doing in their organizations. We'll leave those available to you inside of Alberta and visit Alberta. Take a look at what they're doing, where they're going, and take a look at the tourism sector. There's all kinds of opportunities to get trained up, whether it's in one of our institutions, whether it's in one of the large companies that does their own thing. There's lots of different paths here, and I firmly believe, as you said, tourism sector, the hospitality sector, it's a great way to get started, but it's also a great way to have a career. It's not just a starting path. So, David, thanks for joining us. Look forward to seeing you. Hopefully, when I'm out your way soon, we'll get together again. And thanks for joining us.
Everyone be well. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Ed Up Canada podcast. We release new episodes regularly, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you know when they are officially out. If you love this episode, please leave a 4 or 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts so that others can also discover how a set of skills can lead to success. Thanks for learning with us.